A millionaire rescued a homeless girl from a trash heap and brought her to his home. The next day, as he returns unexpectedly, he is greeted by the sound of ambulance sirens echoing, and then the air bit like needles. Frost clung stubbornly to the edges of cracked pavement, and the dim light from a flickering street lamp cast jagged shadows in the alley. Anna crouched low by a row of overfilled garbage bins, her trembling hands searching through the freezing waste. Her coat, 2 sizes too large and riddled with holes, did little to shield her from the biting cold. A gust of wind swept past, whipping her matted hair into her eyes. She blinked quickly, trying to stave off the tears, not from sadness, but from the sting of the relentless chill. A lone sedan rolled to a stop on the road nearby, the headlights briefly illuminating her figure. Edward tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his breath visible in the cabin. He hadn't intended to stop. The day had already drained him. Back-to-back meetings, decisions that blurred into one another. But then, he'd seen her, a girl too thin for her frame, her every movement laced with desperation. It wasn't the first time he'd seen a homeless person, but something about her struck him. Maybe it was the way she flinched every time she heard the wind whistle, as though it carried something more sinister. For a long moment, he stayed frozen in the driver's seat, weighing the consequences. What if she's dangerous? Or worse, what if I make this worse for her somehow? His hesitation teetered on the edge of inaction. But then, she slumped against the dumpster, clutching her knees to her chest. The motion was small, but it cracked something inside him. Before he fully understood why, Edward was out of the car. The crunch of his boots on the frost-laden ground made Anna tense. She shot a sharp glance over her shoulder, her body coiled like a spring. Edward raised his hands, palms up, as if approaching a wild animal. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice calm but clear in the icy night. Anna didn't reply. Her gaze darted to the garbage bin, as though deciding whether to shield herself with it. She pressed her lips together tightly. "You look like you need help," Edward continued, keeping his distance. His breath fogged in the cold as he spoke. "I've got a warm car, no strings attached, just shelter for the night." Anna's eyes narrowed. People who offered help were rarely selfless. She had learned that lesson early. Still, the sharp pang of hunger clawing at her stomach and the unbearable cold gnawing at her fingers made her hesitate. She studied him. His coat neat but not ostentatious, his hands empty, and his face calm but not patronizing. There was no pity in his tone, only an odd sincerity that disarmed her. "I don't take charity," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Edward didn't flinch. "It's not charity, just a chance to warm up and eat something." Her mistrust lingered, but as another icy gust whipped through the alley, she realized her options were limited. Slowly she stood, one hand clutching the strap of her battered backpack. "Fine," she said, the word laced with reluctance. Edward nodded, stepping aside to let her move first. She limped slightly, a detail he silently noted as they approached the car. Once inside, the heater blasted warm air, and Anna sank into the seat with a mix of exhaustion and relief. She held her backpack tightly, her knuckles white against the straps. Edward eased the car back onto the road, keeping one eye on her. "You've got a name?" "Anna," she said curtly, glancing out the window. The world outside blurred into dark shapes and streaks of light. "I'm Edward," he offered, but she didn't respond. He let the silence hang for a moment before speaking again. "Rough night?" Anna's laugh was dry, almost bitter. "Rough year." Something in her tone made him press carefully. "Family." She stiffened slightly but answered after a pause. "Gone. Just me now." Her voice softened, and for a moment she sounded far away. "My mum. She died when I was 14. sick for a long time. After that, everything fell apart. Edward tightened his grip on the wheel. He had guessed she'd been through hell, but hearing it confirmed made the weight in his chest grow heavier. "I'm sorry," he said, not knowing what else to offer. Anna shrugged, feigning indifference. "It's life. You deal with it or don't." Her words carried a resilience that was difficult to ignore. Edward glanced at her again, noticing the tension in her shoulders and the wary way she glanced at every car they passed. She didn't trust the world, and maybe she had every reason not to. The mansion loomed into view, its lights glowing warmly in the distance. As they pulled into the driveway, Edward cut the engine and looked at Anna. "It's not much, but it's a roof and a meal." Anna smirked faintly, the edge of sarcasm creeping into her voice. "Not much? This place looks like a castle." Edward chuckled softly, appreciating her humor despite the circumstances. "Come on, let's get you inside." For the first time in years, Anna stepped into a house that didn't like a trap. The warmth wrapped around her like a long-forgotten embrace. And though she didn't say it, a tiny flicker of hope lit somewhere deep inside her. The heavy wooden door creaked open into a bright, warm space that seemed a world away from the biting cold of the alley. Anna hesitated on the threshold, clutching her tattered backpack. Her gaze darted across the pristine entryway, noting polished floors, sleek furniture, and walls lined with paintings she couldn't begin to place. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something baking, a scent so foreign it made her chest ache. "Come in," Edward said gently, gesturing her inside. He shrugged off his coat, hanging it neatly by the door. She followed his lead, her own coat sagging heavily as she handed it to him. The contrast between the two was stark. His was clean and tailored, hers threadbare and patched with mismatched fabric. Before Anna could take another step, a woman in her early 60s appeared from the hallway, her expression warm but inquisitive. Her hair, streaked with silver, was tied back in a tidy bun, and her posture exuded quiet authority. "Donna, this is Anna," Edward introduced. "She'll be staying here for a bit. Could you make her comfortable?" Donna's sharp eyes swept over Anna's frame, her hollow cheeks, two thin arms, and guarded stance. Without a word, she nodded, her expression softening. "Of course," Donna replied, her voice calm and steady. She turned to Anna, her gaze inviting but firm. "Let's get you cleaned up. You look like you could use a warm bath." Anna hesitated, her fingers tightening around her backpack strap. I don't want to be any trouble." Donna's lips quirked into a faint smile. "Trouble or not, you won't set foot in this house another minute without warming up properly. Come on, I'll show you where the bathroom is." Edward's phone buzzed in his pocket, cutting through the moment. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing slightly. "I'll be back in a few hours. Donna will take care of you, Anna." Anna nodded mutely, watching him leave. The sound of the door closing echoed through the quiet house, leaving her with Donna, who gestured for her to follow. The bathroom Donna led her to felt more luxurious than anything Anna had ever imagined. White tiles gleamed under soft lighting, and the tub was large enough to stretch out in. As the warm water filled the basin, steam curling into the air, Donna handed Anna a towel and a neatly folded set of clothes. "These should fit well enough," Donna said. "Take your time. When you're ready, I'll have something hot for you to eat." Anna muttered a faint, "Thank you," before stepping inside and closing the door. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her face, pale and drawn, looked like a stranger's. Dirt smudged her forehead, and her hair hung in limp tangles. Slowly, she undressed and slipped into the water. The warmth engulfed her, a sensation so foreign it brought tears to her eyes. She scrubbed her skin until it turned pink, as though washing away the months of grime could erase the memories too. By the time she stepped out and donned the clean clothes, soft cotton pants and a simple sweater, she felt a little less like the girl from the alley and a little more like someone who belonged in a place like this. Almost. Donna was waiting in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something that smelled rich and savory. A plate with a thick slice of bread and butter sat waiting on the counter. Anna hovered in the doorway, unsure of her welcome, but Donna waved her in without turning around. "Sit," Donna said. "You must be starving." Anna sat, her hands fidgeting in her lap. The first spoonful of soup Donna placed before her was tentative, but once the warm broth hit her tongue, she couldn't stop. She ate with a desperation that surprised even herself, though Donna said nothing, simply refilling her bowl once she emptied it. "Better?" Donna asked after a while, leaning on the counter with a mug of tea. Anna nodded, her voice small but genuine. "Thank you. It's been a while since I've had a real meal." Donna sipped her tea, her sharp gaze softening. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to, but you've been through it, haven't you?" Anna hesitated, the question hanging in the air like a fragile thread. Then she spoke, her words cautious but steady. "My mum. She died a few years ago. After that, everything fell apart. No school, no home, just surviving." Donna didn't flinch or press, only nodded with quiet understanding. "That's a heavy load for someone your age." Anna shrugged, her shoulders stiff. "You get used to it." Donna appeared again, a folded blanket in her hands. "Edward's not one to say much, but I can tell he means well." "Edward lives with his father, who is also a sentimental person." She shook her head. "He is traveling on a long trip to Los Angeles." Donna smiled faintly. "Get some rest, love. You've earned it." The kindness in Donna's tone cracked something deep inside Anna. She blinked quickly, swallowing against the sudden tightness in her throat. For the first time in years, the knot of mistrust she carried began to loosen just a little. The house was unnervingly quiet that morning. The faint ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece seemed amplified in the absence of Donna's steady presence. She'd left early to run errands, leaving Anna to sit cross-legged in the armchair by the fire, staring into the flames. She hadn't dared to wander too far, unwilling to test the limits of her tenuous place here. The soft comfort of the house still felt alien. Her fingers traced the edge of the knitted blanket Donna had left draped over her, the texture unfamiliar against her rough skin. She pulled it closer and glanced at her backpack on the floor, its worn straps a sharp contrast to the polished surroundings. The piece was shattered by the sound of the front door swinging open, followed by the thud of heavy footsteps. Anna stiffened, her grip tightening on the blanket. She rose slowly, instinctively stepping back, as a tall, broad-shouldered man strode into the living room. "Arthur!" He stopped abruptly at the sight of her, his stern face twisting into shock. His graying hair was neatly combed, his tailored coat and polished shoes marking him as someone used to commanding respect. But his expression faltered as his gaze locked onto Anna. His eyes widened and his lips parted slightly, as though he were seeing a ghost. "You," he murmured, the word heavy with disbelief. His voice was deep, authoritative, but tinged with something fragile. "Who are you?" Anna didn't answer. Her throat was dry, her instincts screaming at her to retreat, but she stood frozen under his piercing stare. His face paled, the strength in his presence suddenly wavering. "You look just like—" Arthur's words trailed off, his hand reaching out to steady himself on the back of a nearby chair. His breathing grew labored, his chest heaving under the weight of some unseen force. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, he collapsed to the floor. Anna's heart leapt into her throat. "Oh my God," she gasped, rushing to his side. Her mind raced as she kneeled beside him, her fingers trembling. "Sir, can you hear me?" Arthur's face was ashen, his eyes half closed. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to focus. Edward had left his number by the kitchen phone, but this was no time for a call that could delay help. She spotted a landline on the nearby table and snatched it up, punching in the emergency number with shaking hands. "This is 911. What's your emergency?" The calm voice on the other end steadied her nerves slightly. "A man just collapsed," Anna said quickly, her voice tight with urgency. "I think it's a heart attack. Please send an ambulance. 219 Maplewood Drive." The dispatcher asked her to check his breathing and pulse. She followed their instructions, her hands pressing lightly on Arthur's chest. His pulse was faint, his breaths shallow, but he was alive. "Help is on the way," the dispatcher assured her. Anna set the phone down, her hands clammy as she adjusted the cushion under Arthur's head. "Just hang on," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "They'll be here soon." Minutes felt like hours as she stayed by his side, her own breathing ragged. The sound of sirens finally pierced the tense quiet, and Anna bolted to the door, waving the paramedics in. By the time Edward arrived, the ambulance had already left, taking Arthur to the hospital. Anna sat curled in the same armchair, the blanket pulled tightly around her. Her face was pale, her knuckles white from clutching the fabric. Edward's rushed entrance startled her. He looked at her, his sharp features laced with alarm. "Anna, what happened?" She swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak. "Your dad, he came back. I didn't know who he was. He just showed up and—" Her voice faltered as she gestured vaguely toward the spot where Arthur had collapsed. "He looked at me, and then he just went down. I called 911. They took him to the hospital." Edward's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. He rubbed his hand over his face, a mix of worry and frustration brewing behind his eyes. "I didn't think he'd be back so soon," he muttered. His voice softened when he turned back to her. "You did the right thing, calling for help." Anna nodded numbly. She couldn't shake the image of Arthur's face, the shock, the fear, and something else she couldn't quite place. Edward sat down across from her, his gaze steady but gentle. "I need to go check on him," he said. "You'll be okay here, right?" Anna hesitated, but nodded. "Yeah. Go." For a moment, he lingered, as though unsure if he should leave her alone. But there was no time for indecision. With a brief nod, he was out the door, the sound of his car fading into the distance. Alone again, Anna leaned back, the weight of the morning pressing heavily on her chest. She closed her eyes, the flicker of firelight dancing across her lids. Arthur's expression was burned into her memory, and for the first time she wondered what exactly he had seen in her face that had struck him so deeply. The sterile smell of antiseptics hung heavy in the hospital air, mingling with the faint hum of machines. Edward stood by Arthur's bedside, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His father's face, pale and lined with tension, seemed older in the stark fluorescent light. Arthur's breathing was steady now, but his eyes flickered with unease, darting between Edward and the ceiling. Edward broke the silence, his voice low but firm. "What happened, Dad? Anna said you looked at her and just collapsed. What was that about?" Arthur's gaze settled on his son, and for a moment he said nothing. His lips pressed into a thin line, his fingers gripping the blanket covering him. "It's complicated," he finally muttered, his voice hoarse. "Complicated?" Edward's tone sharpened, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "You see a young girl, and it's enough to put you in the hospital. What aren't you telling me?" Arthur sighed, his chest rising and falling heavily. "She looks exactly like someone I knew. Someone I..." wronged. He paused, his expression crumbling under the weight of his words. Her name was Helen. Edward stiffened, the name unfamiliar but clearly significant. Who's Helen? Arthur's hand twitched against the blanket. Years ago, when you were a child, I had an affair. Helen was... she was different, kind, gentle. I cared about her deeply, but I was a coward. I didn't tell her I was already married. When Susan found out, she forced me to end it. Made sure Helen left and never came back. Edward's stomach churned. You cheated on Mom? Arthur winced at the accusation, his face tightening with regret. I was young and selfish. It was a mistake, and I've paid for it every day since. But I didn't know Helen was pregnant. I swear I didn't. Helen left. I didn't fight her decision. How could I? Susan made it clear that if I didn't fix the mess I'd made, she'd leave too. And I thought that was the end of it. Edward shook his head, frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. And you never thought to check on Helen? To see what happened to her? Arthur looked away, his gaze fixed on the window. No, he admitted. I thought it would be better for everyone if I stayed away. Edward let the words hang in the air, the weight of them pressing against the walls. And now you think Anna is... I don't know, Arthur cut in, his voice faltering. But when I saw her, Edward, she looked just like Helen. The resemblance, it's haunting. Edward leaned back, his head tipping toward the ceiling as he processed the confession. He felt anger rise, but it was laced with something heavier. Sadness. You think she's your daughter, he said quietly. Arthur nodded, the admission settling like a stone between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Edward's mind raced. He thought of Anna, her guarded eyes, the way she flinched at kindness. If Arthur's hunch was correct, the truth would shatter her. But there was no certainty yet, and without it, everything remained fragile. We need to know for sure, Edward said finally, his voice firm. I'll arrange for a test. If she's your daughter, we'll deal with it then. But until we're certain, she doesn't need to know anything. Arthur frowned. You want to keep it from her? Can you blame me? Edward shot back. She's already been through hell. Dropping this on her without proof would be cruel. Arthur opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. Edward was right, and deep down, he knew it. Fine, he said, his voice subdued, but I want to know the moment you do. Back at the house, Anna was sitting by the fire again, her figure silhouetted against the warm glow. She looked up as Edward entered, her expression cautious but curious. How is he? She asked, her voice softer than usual. Edward hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Stable. He's resting now. Anna nodded, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. That's good. Edward crossed the room, sitting down in the chair opposite her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the crackle of the fire. He studied her, the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her fingers twisted nervously in the fabric of the blanket. You really did save him, Edward said finally. If you hadn't called for help, things could have been much worse. Anna shrugged, her gaze dropping to the flames. I just did what anyone would do. Not everyone would have kept their cool like that, Edward said, his tone steady but sincere. It says a lot about you. She didn't respond immediately, her shoulders tensing slightly. He looked at me like he knew me, like I was someone else. Edward's heart tightened at her words, but he kept his expression neutral. He's been through a lot, he said carefully, and seeing someone new in the house might have thrown him off. Don't read too much into it. Anna frowned but didn't press further. She leaned back, her eyes flickering between Edward and the fire. This house, it doesn't feel real sometimes, like it's too good to be true. The days that followed felt like years. The DNA test was arranged quietly. Edward visited Arthur regularly, keeping their conversations brief. He hadn't told Anna about Arthur yet, avoiding any mention of the man's sudden arrival. She didn't ask. When the results came in, Edward read the confirmation with a heavy heart. Anna was Arthur's daughter. The truth stared back at him, unyielding, and he realized that his role as a mediator had just become infinitely more complicated. Back at the hospital, Edward handed the results to Arthur without a word. Arthur's hands shook as he unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the page. When he looked up, his expression was a mixture of grief and something that looked like hope. "She's my daughter," he whispered. Edward nodded, his face unreadable. "She is." Arthur closed his eyes, leaning back against the pillow. "What do we do now?" "We wait," Edward said firmly. "I'll tell her when the time is right. But for now, you focus on getting better. You can't fix anything from a hospital bed." Arthur didn't argue. He knew Edward was right, though the weight of his mistakes felt heavier than ever. As Edward left the room, Arthur stared out the window, the sky outside a dull grey. He had a daughter, a living, breathing reminder of his past, and now he had to find a way to earn her trust, even if it took the rest of his life. The house felt unusually heavy when Arthur returned. The warmth and elegance of the space, so familiar to him, seemed muted now, dulled by the weight of his own guilt. Donna had insisted he rest upstairs, but he lingered in the living room, eyes darting toward Anna, who stood by the window. She seemed oblivious to his presence, her gaze fixed on the garden outside, though her posture was tense, as if she were ready to bolt at any moment. Arthur cleared his throat, his voice catching slightly. "It's a lovely view, isn't it?" Anna turned, startled. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him. "It's nice," she replied, curtly, crossing her arms over her chest. Arthur shifted awkwardly, his hands fidgeting at his sides. "I hope I didn't frighten you the other day. I wasn't feeling well." Anna's expression softened just a fraction. "You didn't scare me. I was just, surprised." He nodded, struggling for words. I wanted to thank you for what you did, calling for help, staying calm. It means a great deal." Anna shrugged, her gaze flickering back to the window. "It's what anyone would have done." Arthur opened his mouth to respond but faltered. He could feel the gulf between them, wide and unyielding, and his own hesitation only seemed to deepen it. "Well," he said after a pause, "if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." She nodded faintly but didn't look at him. Arthur lingered for a moment longer before retreating upstairs, his shoulders slumping as he ascended the staircase. In the kitchen, Donna watched Arthur go, her sharp eyes following his every step. Once he disappeared, she turned to Anna, who had wandered in and begun wiping the already pristine countertops. "You know," Donna began, her voice light, "Mr. Arthur can be a bit stiff, but he means well." Anna paused, the cloth frozen in her hand. "I barely know him." "That doesn't mean you can't get to know him," Donna replied, her tone gentle but firm. "People can surprise you." Anna shook her head, resuming her cleaning. "I'm not here to make friends." Donna chuckled softly. "Fair enough, but it wouldn't hurt to let him try." Arthur, meanwhile, sat in his study, the weight of the DNA result still pressing against his thoughts. He'd read the confirmation again and again, as though the words might change under repeated scrutiny. Anna was his daughter. The knowledge was both a revelation and a burden. He knew he couldn't force a connection with her, but the desire to bridge the gap gnawed at him constantly. The next day, Arthur mustered the courage to join Anna in the garden. She had taken to spending mornings outside, pruning the overgrown rose bushes with a quiet determination. He stood at the edge of the patio, watching her for a moment before stepping closer. "You're excellent at that," he said, motioning to the bushes. Anna glanced at him, her expression neutral. "Donna showed me how." Arthur hesitated before crouching near a different bush. "Mind if I help?" She didn't answer immediately, but after a long pause, she shrugged. "Sure." They worked in silence, the only sounds being the snip of shears and the occasional rustle of leaves. Arthur searched for the right words, the silence stretching uncomfortably between them. "Anna," he began carefully, "I know I'm not easy to be around. I just—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I want you to feel comfortable here." Anna straightened, brushing her hands on her jeans. "I'm fine," she said tersely, her tone ending the conversation before it could begin. Arthur sighed, watching her retreat back toward the house. Despite her reticence with Arthur, Anna began to settle into the rhythm of the house. She helped Donna with the cooking and cleaning, her movements growing more confident as the days passed. Donna, ever observant, noticed the small changes, the way Anna's shoulders loosened slightly when she entered the kitchen, or the faint smile that flickered across her face when the soup turned out just right. "You're a quick learner," Donna remarked one afternoon, as Anna kneaded dough at the counter. "I used to help my mom cook," Anna said quietly, her eyes focused on her hands. "Before everything changed." Donna nodded, her expression softening. "Well, you've got a knack for it, and I could always use an extra pair of hands." Anna's lips twitched into the faintest smile. "Thanks." Arthur watched these small moments from a distance, his admiration for Anna growing even as his guilt deepened. Her resilience was evident in everything she did, from the way she tackled housework with precision to the way she held herself in quiet defiance when the past crept too close. He wanted to say something, to acknowledge the strength she carried, but every attempt felt clumsy, inadequate. "You'll scare her off if you keep hovering," Donna said one evening, catching Arthur lingering in the hallway outside the kitchen. Arthur sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know how to reach her." "Patience," Donna said firmly. "She's been through more than you can imagine. Rushing won't help. Let her come to you." Arthur nodded reluctantly, retreating to his study. He knew Donna was right, but the waiting gnawed at him. For now, all he could do was hope that the fragile connection between them would eventually grow into something stronger. It was a quiet afternoon when Anna, wandering the house in a rare moment of aimlessness, found herself drawn to Edward's study. She hesitated at the threshold, one hand brushing the doorframe. The room was orderly, almost clinical, with shelves lined with thick books and perfectly stacked documents on the large mahogany desk. It felt too pristine, too private, but curiosity tugged her forward. She traced her fingers along the edges of the desk, her eyes scanning the objects neatly arranged on its surface. A small wooden box caught her attention, its lid slightly ajar. Inside, old photographs lay tucked together, their edges worn with age. Anna's heart skipped as she lifted the topmost photo. A young woman smiled back at her face strikingly familiar. Anna's breath hitched as she recognized her mother's youthful features, her soft eyes, the curve of her lips. Beneath the photo was another, her mother and a man she didn't know. Her chest tightened as her gaze lingered on the man's face, sharp and unmistakable. Arthur. The photo slipped from her trembling fingers, fluttering onto the desk. A wave of nausea surged through her, anger rising to the surface as she struggled to process the implications. She grabbed the photos and stormed out of the study, her footsteps echoing through the quiet house. Edward found her in the living room, pacing furiously with the photos clutched in her hand. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild with emotion. "Anna," he began cautiously, "what's wrong?" She whirled to face him, thrusting the photos toward him. "This," she spat, her voice trembling. "Why do you have these? Why didn't you tell me?" Edward's stomach dropped as he recognized the photos. He had hoped to control how and when this truth would unfold, but now it was unraveling far too quickly. "Anna, let me explain," he said, his voice calm but firm. She stepped back, shaking her head. "You've been lying to me this whole time. You knew, and you didn't say anything." "It's not what you think," Edward said, taking a cautious step forward. "I didn't know for sure." Anna's hand swept across the desk, knocking over a stack of papers. Among them, a document caught her eye. She froze, her gaze locking onto the bold title at the top. DNA test results. Her hands shook as she snatched it up, her eyes scanning the words. Her name. Arthur's name. A confirmation. Her breath hitched, her throat tightening, as the truth hit her like a blow. "You tested me." Her voice cracked. "Without telling me." Edward reached for her, his expression pleading. "Anna, please let me explain." "You had no right," she shouted, her voice raw with pain. "You had no right to keep this from me, to make decisions about my life without telling me." "I was trying to protect you," Edward said, his tone steady despite the anguish in his eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you." Anna's laughter was bitter, sharp as broken glass. "Protect me? By lying to me? By hiding the fact that he—" She pointed toward the ceiling, where Arthur's study loomed. "Is my father?" Edward took a deep breath, his hands dropping to his sides. "Anna, listen. He didn't know. Arthur didn't know your mother was pregnant. He made mistakes, yes, but he didn't abandon you or your mum on purpose." She glared at him, her anger flaring hotter. "You expect me to believe that? That he just didn't know? That he gets to live in this big house with his perfect life, while my mum worked herself to death just trying to keep us alive?" Her voice cracked at the end, and tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "She deserved better," she whispered, her tone softer but no less searing. "We both did." Edward stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You're right. She did. And so do you. That's why I didn't want to rush this. I needed to be sure before telling you." Anna shook her head, backing away. "I don't care about his excuses. I don't want anything from him. Not now. Not ever." "Anna, wait." But she was already gone, storming out of the room and up the stairs. The sound of her door slamming echoed through the house, leaving Edward standing alone in the aftermath. Upstairs, Anna collapsed onto her bed, her body trembling with the force of her emotions. The photos and the test results lay scattered around her, damning evidence of a past she hadn't asked for. She pressed her hands to her face, her breathing shallow as the weight of it all pressed down on her. Her mother's face lingered in her mind, soft and kind, but etched with exhaustion. She had worked herself into the ground to care for Anna, while the man who could have helped, who should have been there, had lived in blissful ignorance. The thought made her chest ache, anger and grief warring for dominance. She didn't know how to reconcile this new truth with the life she had lived and with the loss that had shaped her. All she knew was that she couldn't face Arthur. Not now. Maybe not ever. Downstairs, Edward sat heavily in the armchair, his head in his hands. He had wanted to shield her from this pain, but now it seemed unavoidable. Arthur would have to know what had happened, and the fragile connection between them was now at greater risk than ever. The crackle of the fire filled the silence, but Edward felt no warmth. He could only hope that time would soften Anna's anger and that she would see the truth for what it was. But for now, all he could do was wait. The knock on Anna's door was hesitant at first, almost uncertain, but quickly gained firmness. She froze, clutching the edge of her blanket as though it might shield her from the conversation she knew was coming. "Anna," Arthur's voice came through, rough but subdued. "Can I come in? Please. I just want to talk." Her chest tightened, her nails digging into the fabric. "Go away," she called back, her voice trembling but sharp. There was a pause. For a moment, she thought he might leave, but then his voice came again, quieter, almost pleading. "I know I don't deserve your time. I know I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but if you'd just let me explain." Anna sprang from the bed, yanking the door open. Arthur stepped back, startled by the intensity in her eyes. "Explain?" she spat, her words laced with bitterness. "What is there to explain? That you abandoned my mum? That you had no idea I existed while she worked herself to death? Or that you get to stand here now, in your perfect life, and expect me to just forgive you?" Arthur's expression crumpled under her words, guilt etched deeply into his face. "I didn't know, Anna. If I had—" "But you didn't," she snapped, her voice breaking. "And now you think showing up, apologizing, makes up for everything. It doesn't." Tears threatened to spill as she stepped back, shaking her head. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't." Before Arthur could respond, she brushed past him, storming down the hallway. Edward appeared at the base of the stairs, an alarm flashing across his face. "Anna, wait." But she didn't. The front door slammed behind her, leaving Arthur rooted in place, his outstretched hand falling limply to his side. Edward turned to him, frustration and sympathy mingling in his eyes. "You can't force this, Dad," Edward said softly. Arthur said nothing, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her rejection. The rain came down in heavy sheets, soaking the park in a cold, relentless downpour. Anna sat on a worn wooden bench, her shoulders hunched and her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her thin jacket clung to her frame, offering little protection from the chill. She stared at the puddles forming in the dirt path, her thoughts swirling as wildly as the rain around her. The betrayal still burned. The photos, the test results, the years of unanswered questions. It was all too much. Her chest ached with a mixture of anger and sadness, so sharp, it felt like she couldn't breathe. "Mind if I sit?" Edward's voice cut through the rain, soft but steady. She hadn't even heard him approach. He stood a few feet away, his umbrella dripping with rainwater. Anna didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the ground. Edward took her silence as permission and sat beside her, keeping the umbrella tilted just enough to shield her from the worst of the downpour. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain pounded against the umbrella, a rhythmic backdrop to the charged silence. Edward waited, his patience a quiet testament to his understanding. Finally, Anna broke the silence, her voice barely audible. "It's not fair." Edward didn't rush to fill the quiet. Instead, he nodded, encouraging her to continue. "My mom gave everything," Anna said, her tone laced with bitterness. "She worked until she was too sick to stand. And he—" Her voice cracked as she gestured vaguely toward the house. "He didn't even know. He didn't care." Edward sighed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I don't think it's that simple, Anna." She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "How is it not? He lived his life while we were struggling just to survive. He had everything and we had nothing." "You're right," Edward admitted, his tone calm but firm. "He did have everything, and he made mistakes, big ones. But he didn't know about you. If he had, don't you think he would have done something?" Anna looked away, her jaw tightening. "It doesn't change anything." "No, it doesn't," Edward agreed. "But holding on to this anger, It'll only hurt you more in the end." She scoffed, shaking her head. "Don't start with the forgiveness speech." "I'm not asking you to forgive him," Edward said gently. "Not yet. But maybe try to understand him. He's not perfect, Anna. Far from it. But he's trying. Doesn't that count for something?" Anna didn't respond immediately. The rain continued to fall, the cold seeping into her skin. She wanted to push back, to tell Edward he didn't understand. But something in his voice stopped her. There was no judgment, no pressure, just quiet sincerity. "I don't know if I can," she admitted finally, her voice trembling. "He feels like a stranger." Edward nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You don't have to figure it all out today, or even tomorrow. Take your time, but give yourself the chance to heal. You deserve that." Anna looked at him, her expression conflicted. For the first time, she noticed the lines of exhaustion on his face and the weariness in his eyes. He was carrying more than he let on, and yet he still sat here in the rain, just to be with her. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Edward's smile softened. "Because you're worth it, and because I know what it's like to feel lost." Something in his words stirred her, a flicker of understanding passing between them. She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. By the time the rain began to let up, Anna's shivering had subsided. Edward stood, extending a hand to her. "Come on, let's get you home." She hesitated, her eyes searching for something she couldn't quite name. Finally, she reached out, taking his hand. Back at the house, Anna retreated to her room, the conversation replaying in her mind. Edward's words lingered, softening the edges of her anger. For the first time, the idea of moving forward didn't feel so impossible. The next morning, she found Edward in the kitchen, sipping coffee, as the sunlight streamed through the windows. She cleared her throat, drawing his attention. "I've decided to stay," she said, her voice steady, but guarded. "But only on my terms." Edward raised an eyebrow, setting his mug down. "I'm listening. I want you to help me. Find a way to help me come back to the school and finish school, finding my footing," Anna continued. "And I'll try to give Arthur a chance. But I'm not making any promises." Edward nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Fair enough." Anna hesitated, then added, "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," Edward said, his tone warm. "I'm just glad you're staying." As she turned to leave, Edward called after her. "One step at a time, Anna. That's all it takes." She paused, a faint smile crossing her lips. One step at a time. The campus buzzed with energy. Students shuffled between towering buildings, their chatter mingling with the hum of a crisp autumn breeze. Anna clutched her bag tightly as she stood at the entrance to her dorm, her gaze fixed on the sprawling grounds before her. It felt surreal, almost foreign, to be here. A place filled with opportunity, a stark contrast to the life she had known. Edward stood beside her, his calm presence steadying. "You'll be fine," he said, his tone confident but gentle. "This is your chance, Anna. Take it." She nodded, though her chest still felt heavy with doubt. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, the emotions raw and overwhelming. But Edward had kept his word. He had helped her enroll in college, insisting that her story didn't have to end in anger and loss. "Thanks," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the bustle of the students around them. Edward smiled. "Remember, one step at a time." She hesitated, then returned the faintest of smiles. "One step at a time," she echoed. Later that evening, as the dorm quieted and Anna began unpacking her few belongings, she noticed a sealed envelope tucked into her bag. Her name was written neatly across the front in Arthur's handwriting. She froze, the weight of the letter almost unbearable in her hands. For a moment, she considered leaving it unopened, the pain and anger still too raw, but something, curiosity perhaps, or a faint glimmer of hope, compelled her to sit on the bed and carefully break the seal. The letter was short but heartfelt, the words written with a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "My dearest Anna, I don't expect you to forgive me, nor do I deserve it. But I hope you'll allow me to share my heart with you." Edward often mediated, his steady presence helping to bridge the gaps. He encouraged Anna to share stories about her classes. Her newfound passion for social work was evident in the way her eyes lit up when she spoke. "I want to help people like me," she told them one afternoon. "People who feel invisible, who thinks they don't matter." Arthur's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but he only nodded. "You'll be incredible at it," he said quietly. Anna's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe him. The first semester passed quickly, and as the holidays approached, Anna found herself reflecting on how much had changed. The wounds of the past hadn't healed entirely, but they were beginning to scar over. The pain was no longer as sharp. She didn't know if she could ever fully forgive Arthur, but she was starting to understand him, and that felt like progress. One evening, as she sat by her dorm window watching the snow fall, her phone buzzed with a message from Edward. "Proud of you. Keep going. One step at a time." She smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she was finding her way. The winter air was sharp, but inside the shelter where Anna volunteered, warmth radiated from the people she worked alongside. She moved purposefully through the room, serving bowls of steaming soup and offering soft words of encouragement to the guests who filed in, one by one. Their faces were a mosaic of suffering, etched with weariness and desperation. Yet as she handed each person a meal, she caught glimmers of gratitude, small smiles that reminded her of why she had chosen this path. One woman caught her attention, thin, with a weary posture and a child clinging to her side. The sight struck a deep chord in Anna. She saw herself and her mother reflected in their hunched shoulders and cautious eyes. Memories surged, her mother's sacrifices, the long nights of worry, the relentless struggle to survive. Later, as Anna walked back to her dorm, her thoughts lingered on the woman and child. It was the first time she truly felt the weight of her mother's choices, not just as a source of anger, but as a testament to love and resilience. Her heart ached, not just for what she had lost, but for what her mother had endured. That evening, Anna sat at her desk, Arthur's letter open before her. She read it again, her emotions swirling. His words no longer felt like empty gestures, but like genuine attempts to reach her. They carried a weight she hadn't been ready to acknowledge before. Taking a deep breath, she picked up a pen and began to write. "Dear Arthur, I've read your letter more times than I can count. Each time, it brings up emotions I don't know how to process. Anger, sadness, confusion, but also something else. Something I'm not ready to name yet. I can't pretend to forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I do see that you're trying, and I respect that. It doesn't erase the pain, but it matters. It matters more than I thought it would. Thank you for your letter, and for showing up. I'm still figuring out what that means for me, but I thought you should know. Anna." She sealed the envelope and set it aside, her hands trembling slightly. Writing the letter felt like releasing a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. The next weekend, Edward arrived on campus to visit her. They sat at a cafe near her dorm, the quiet hum of conversation around them creating a comforting backdrop. "You seem lighter," Edward observed, sipping his coffee. "What's changed?" Anna hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I wrote to him." Edward raised an eyebrow. "To Arthur?" She nodded. "I didn't say much, just enough." Edward's smile widened. "That's a big step, Anna. I'm proud of you." "It doesn't mean everything's okay," she said quickly. "I'm still figuring things out." "And that's okay," Edward said gently. "Healing doesn't happen all at once." Arthur received the letter a few days later. He read it slowly, his hands trembling as he held the paper. The words were cautious, but they held a glimmer of hope, a small opening, a chance. He tucked the letter into his jacket pocket, carrying it with him like a talisman. As the semester continued, Anna threw herself into her studies and her volunteer work. Each day felt like another small step forward, a piece of the life she was rebuilding. She began to see Arthur and Edward's weekend visits not as obligations, but as moments of connection. Arthur still tread carefully, his vulnerability evident in every word and gesture, but Anna started to notice the sincerity in his efforts. One Sunday afternoon, as they sat on a bench near the campus library, Arthur spoke up. "I'm proud of you, Anna. Not just for what you're doing, but for who you are." She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "It's not easy," she admitted, "but I'm trying." "That's all anyone can ask for," he said softly. For the first time, Anna didn't feel the urge to pull away. She nodded, letting his words settle. The holidays came, and Anna found herself reflecting on how much had changed. The anger still lingered, but it no longer consumed her. She had begun to see Arthur not just as the man who had hurt her, but as someone trying to make amends. It was a fragile connection, but it was growing. One snowy evening, as she sat by her dorm window, her phone buzzed with a message from Arthur. "Thank you for your letter. It meant more than I can say. One step at a time, right?" Anna smiled, her heart softening. "One step at a time," she replied. "Many autumns have passed. Today the auditorium was filled with a hum of excitement, the air electric with anticipation. Families and friends who had gathered to witness a significant event in their loved ones' lives occupied rows of chairs that stretched across the polished floor. On stage, a long table draped in a crimson cloth bore the college's insignia, flanked by faculty members in ceremonial robes. Anna stood in line with her fellow graduates, her cap balanced carefully on her head and her gown trailing softly behind her. She clutched the edges of the speech she had written, her palms slightly damp with nerves. The weight of the moment felt both exhilarating and daunting. In the audience, Edward and Arthur sat side by side. Edward's calm, proud expression masked the quiet satisfaction he felt. Arthur, on the other hand, looked a mixture of hopeful and emotional, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The ceremony began with opening remarks and the roll call of graduates, the rhythmic flow of names and applause building toward the final highlight, Anna's speech. When her name was announced, Edward and Arthur both leaned forward in their seats. Anna approached the podium, her steps steady but deliberate. She paused for a moment, gazing out over the sea of faces, her eyes briefly meeting Edward's and then Arthur's. Taking a deep breath, she began. "Good afternoon, everyone," Anna started, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "Today is a day of celebration, not just for what we've accomplished, but for the people who have helped us along the way." She scanned the room, her words carefully measured. "When I think about my journey, it's impossible not to reflect on where I've come from. There were times when I didn't think I'd make it here, moments when life felt insurmountable. But I did. And I'm here because of the people who refused to let me give up." Her gaze found Edward, and a small, genuine smile graced her lips. "First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to my mother, Helen. She brought me into this world and was my rock in the early years. Now that she is gone, she still lives in me and is the most peaceful thing I think of. Next, Edward, my mentor, my anchor. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Your patience, your guidance. It gave me a chance to dream again. I'll never forget that. The audience clapped politely, but the warmth in Edward's eyes spoke volumes as he nodded in quiet acknowledgement. Anna's tone softened as she continued. Donna, though she isn't here today, was a constant source of kindness in my life. Her steady hand and sharp wisdom reminded me that, even in the darkest times, there is warmth to be found. A pause lingered, tension building as Anna turned toward the place where Arthur sat. And finally, my father. Arthur's breath caught, his hands gripping the edge of his seat. His eyes glistened as Anna hesitated, her expression flickering between vulnerability and strength. There was a time when I thought I'd never say those words, she admitted, her voice quieter now. A time when anger and hurt consumed me. But as I stand here today, I've realized that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about finding a way to move forward. She met Arthur's gaze directly. Dad, I forgive you. Not because it's easy, but because I want us both to heal. Thank you for showing me that people can change and that it's never too late to try. You didn't have to, but you did. And that means everything. A stunned silence followed, broken by a wave of applause that rippled through the auditorium. Arthur covered his face with his hands, overwhelmed. Beside him, Edward reached out, giving his father's shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze. After the ceremony, the three of them stood together outside, the crisp spring air a welcome contrast to the warmth of the auditorium. Anna held her diploma tightly, her expression a blend of pride and relief. You were incredible, Edward said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Anna smiled, glancing between him and Arthur. I meant every word. Arthur stepped closer, his voice unsteady. Anna, He trailed off, shaking his head as emotion thickened his words. I'm so proud of you. For the first time, Anna didn't flinch at the closeness. Instead, she nodded, her voice soft but steady. Thank you, Dad. The word carried weight, like a bridge finally built between them. Arthur's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, they were tears of gratitude and hope. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of them sat around a small table at a nearby cafe. They laughed, reminisced, and looked forward to the future. For Anna, it was more than just a graduation. It was a moment of transformation, a step into a life filled with possibility. The house was filled with the comforting aroma of Donna's homemade casserole as laughter echoed softly through the rooms. Edward's home, once a quiet and orderly place, now felt alive with the warmth of family. Anna sat at the dining table, her face glowing with joy, her graduation cap resting beside her plate, as if to remind everyone of her triumph. Arthur brought over a dish from the kitchen, his movements a little hesitant but eager to help. I don't know if I got the seasoning right, he said with a sheepish grin, setting the dish on the table. Edward raised an eyebrow, teasing lightly. Since when do you cook, Dad? Arthur chuckled. Well, I thought I'd start somewhere. Figured it was time I learned. Anna smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her face. It smells great, Dad. Thank you. The word Dad hung in the air for a moment, and Arthur paused, his expression softening. It was no longer just a formality, but something real, something earned. He sat down, his gratitude evident in the way his eyes lingered on his daughter. As they ate, Anna recounted moments from her time at college and her plans for the future. "I've been volunteering at the shelter more and more," she said, her voice alight with passion. "And I think it's where I want to be, full-time, helping people like me, like Mom and me. It feels right." Arthur and Edward exchanged proud glances, their unspoken agreement filling the silence before Arthur spoke. "Whatever you need, Anna. I'll support you however I can." Edward nodded, his tone steady. "And you know I'll always be here. You're making a difference, Anna, and I couldn't be prouder." Anna's gaze softened as she looked at both of them, the walls she had built around her heart slowly but surely crumbling. "I wouldn't have made it here without you two. You've both taught me that it's okay to trust, to hope." After dinner, the three of them moved to the living room. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a soft glow on their faces as they shared stories and laughter. Arthur leaned back in his chair, a contented smile on his face. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace, a chance to mend the wounds of the past and look forward to a future where they could be a family. Edward poured them each a small glass of wine, raising his in a toast. To Anna, to forgiveness, and to new beginnings. Anna raised her glass, her smile bright and confident. And to family. Arthur's hand trembled slightly as he clinked his glass with theirs, his heart full in a way he hadn't thought possible. To family, he echoed, his voice thick with emotion. As the evening waned, Anna stood at the window, gazing out at the moonlit garden. Arthur joined her, his presence tentative but steady. "I know I've said it before," he began, "but I'm so proud of you, Anna. You've become someone extraordinary." Anna turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Thanks, Dad. And I'm proud of you too. For trying, for showing up. That means more than you know." Arthur smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I'll keep trying. Always." They stood in comfortable silence, the bond between them no longer fragile, but strong and enduring. That night, as Anna settled into the guest room she had once hesitated to call her own, she felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known in years. The scars of the past would always remain, but they no longer defined her. With Edward's unwavering support and Arthur's earnest attempts to make amends, she had found something she thought she'd lost forever. Family. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.